All right, students, today I'm going to go over the study guide for World War II. And you have a series of questions that has a word bank with each section. Orient the smart board here. The first question reads, what is the name of the political philosophy that states that total power should be given to a dictator with restriction on individual freedoms? And the answer to that is fascism. And we learned that the countries of JIG, J-I-G, Japan, Italy, and Germany have fascist dictators, the Axis powers. Number two, who was the fascist dictator of Italy during World War II? And that was Benito Mussolini, also referred to as El Duce. Number three, what treaty was a peace plan after World War II but penalized Germany, making them seek revenge in World War II? And that is the Treaty of Versailles. Treaty of Versailles. And that penalized Germany by demilitarizing Germany, which means they shrunk their military to 100,000 soldiers. They had to pay $30 billion in war debt, and they lost territories and lands, and there were rules that Germany had to follow. They also had to take blame for the war. And that's not going to make the German people happy, and it's going to make them turn to Hitler, which helped lead to World War II. So the Versailles Treaty was not good for Germany. 4, what was the name of the law passed by the U.S. Congress to provide economic and military aid to Great Britain during World War II? And that was called the Lend-Lease Bill. And that's when we were indirectly involved. We weren't directly involved in the war. Germany and Italy aren't going to like that. 5, what American presidents served during World War II? FDR and Truman. Roosevelt or FDR died a month before the war ended. And so Harry Truman, his vice president, took over the presidency. 6, what was the first Allied victory during World War II? And that was the Battle of Britain. So the British used radar, a new technology, to detect German aircraft and to prevent them from continually performing air raids and bombings. So that was a very important technology used in the early part of the war. All right, now number 6. And there's a typo. I have 2 number 6, but that's okay. The 6 on this page says, what policy did the U.S. take in the early years of World War II in the 1930s? Now, it was a policy of neutrality. And I know any word back that says neutral. Neutrality, isolationism. So the United States didn't join the League of Nations. We were dealing with the Great Depression, and we had problems at home we were concerned with. That's why we didn't get involved in the early part of World War II. But we know there was a spark. 7, what fictional character did the U.S. government create to use to encourage American women to take industrial jobs during the war? And her name was Rosie the Riveter. And her slogan was, "We can do it." Women worked to create airplanes. They worked on bomber assembly lines. They made ships. They made artillery guns. Many of them were ambulance drivers. Many of them were nurses. Many of them worked in factories to make any type of war good so we can win the war. 8, the statement, December 7th, 1941, the date which will live in infamy, was based on what turning point during World War II? and that was the invasion of Pearl Harbor. Which was a surprise attack by the Imperial forces of Japan. About 1,200 sailors died when the USS Shaw and USS Arizona were destroyed. A total of 2,500 Americans perished in that surprise attack. Number 9, after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, what Axis power declared war on the United States? And that was Germany. Axis power declared war on the U.S. So there's a sequence there because that's a word after. 10, what country joined the Allies after it was invaded by Germany? And in your packet, there's a mistake, and hopefully you corrected it. It first says what country joined the Allies after it was invaded by the Soviet Union. Make sure you change Soviet Union to Germany. And the answer is the Soviet Union. Germany, under Hitler, violated the Non-Aggression Pact in 1939, which said that they wouldn't attack each other, they would aid each other militarily and economically. So Germany stabbed Soviet Union in the back, and they're going to pay for that. Number 7, what ended the Great Depression and put unemployed Americans back to work? And that was World War II. The reason why was because there was high demand for the creation and manufacturing of war goods to help win the war. And when you have a high demand and people making a product, you're going to need workers. And people who are unemployed, they have employment because factories and businesses need people, they need bodies to make planes, tanks, submarines, ships, boats, artillery. 8, what 3 turning points in your notes were battles in the Pacific? And I'm going to put a check by those for number 8. You had the Battle of Midway, the atomic bombing of Japan, and the Pearl Harbor invasion. So in sequence, if we were to extend that question, this is going to be the first event of that sequence, the Pearl Harbor invasion, December 7th, 1941. And then you had the Battle of Midway, which was in 1942, before the Battle of Stalingrad. And then at the end of the war, you had the atomic bombing of Japan. Well, we dropped the atomic bomb on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which are very important industrial and communication centers for the Japanese economy. 9, in what turning point did the Soviet Union and Germany battle, which resulted in a turning point for the war in Eastern Europe and a victory against Germany? And the answer is the Stalingrad siege, or the Battle of Stalingrad. Germany lost because they ran out of supplies, they ran out of oil, they ran out of fuel, soldiers died of frostbite, they were starving and hungry. And about 1 million people died in that horrible battle at Stalingrad in Eastern Europe. So it's the turning point of the war, and that lasted that was during the late part of 1942 into the early part of 1943. So this is during the winter time, and Germany wasn't equipped to combat Germany. Germany wasn't equipped to combat the Soviet Union. They didn't learn from history. 10, which of these turning points occurred first in the war? So you have Pearl Harbor invasion of Poland, the D-Day invasion, and the Battle of Britain. So the first event of these turning points is the invasion of Poland, which was September 1st, 1939. Then you have the Battle of Britain, which was in June of 1940. And then the third event after that is going to be Pearl Harbor, December the 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. And then the fourth event is the D-Day invasion of June the 6th, 1944, also known as the Normandy invasion, or Operation Overlord. Number 11, in what way did race relations change in the U.S. during World War II? And you have a description in the word box. The way race relations changed was that racial barriers temporarily broke down. So basically, black and whites, put a T there, work together in defense plans. So blacks and whites work together to help win the war. They worked in factories where they made bullets, guns, tanks, airplanes, bombs, jeeps. So FDR desegregated the defense industries where African Americans and whites could work together. But still, in other parts of the country, in other industries, they remained segregated. So it broke down some racial barriers for a little bit. Number 12, it says, on the gate of the Auschwitz concentration camp, there was a sign that said, Arbeit macht frei, which in German means work makes you free. During what event in World War II was that about? And it was about the Holocaust. Well, we learned that the Holocaust was Adolf Hitler's and the Nazis' systematic plan to exterminate all Jews from Europe. We learned that 6 million Jews were killed and 11 million people in general altogether were killed during the Holocaust. Gypsies, people who were communists, people who were handicapped, people who were disabled, people who were political prisoners, Slavic people, anybody who was considered a threat or inferior to the German people, and they existed in German lands, they were put to death. They were killed during this horrible event in their world's history. Number 13, and I'm going to move this item out of the way so you can see. It says, what group of Americans were treated with racial prejudice, hatred, and distrust, even though many of them were loyal Americans and served in the military? And they were Japanese Americans. They were Japanese Americans. 100,000 Japanese Americans were forced to sell their businesses, sell their homes, and relocate to internment camps across the country, ordered by FDR. It's a sad moment in our country's history. 14, where were Japanese Americans forced to relocate? They were forced to relocate in internment camps. One thing I want to make clear was that Japanese Americans were not tortured, beat, and killed like Jews were in the concentration camps in Europe, in Poland. I want to make that very clear. So internment camps were different. 15, why did Americans can vegetable and plant victory gardens during World War II? Okay, it says, so they can, let's see here, to save food for the Allied soldiers, to feed them. So people planted victory gardens and they harvested those crops they planted and they canned them. You had canned distribution centers. So people stored them away and they ate them. And in regards to that, people didn't shop in the grocery stores. That food surplus was sent abroad to feed the Allied soldiers. So I'm going to stop here for number 15, and part 2 will be coming up next. Thank you for listening.